At the top of a mountain, in a massive cavern, you and your party stand victorious over the tyrannical dragon that plagued your kingdom for centuries. With your foe slain, you see the glint of countless yellow stars as the light of your torch reflects off the piles of metal strewn about the dragon's lair. Piles of golden riches! You swim through the vast wealth you've just earned, pocketing gold coins, potions, gemstones, and unidentified magical trinkets. You've just gotten some epic loot, and as the game master lists off what you find, she gets to the end of the list and realizes that although she may have given you the right amount of money and more mundane items, she's accidentally divvied out too many magical items, and hopes this doesn't come back to bite the story in the ass later. Giving your players the right items at the right time is almost as crucial as delivering plot lines at the right time. Sometimes, too powerful too early can make challenges far too easy, while not giving out enough can make the players feel stagnated. How do you know what to give them? How can you know what might break the game? Stay tuned, because we're talking about balancing loot for your tabletop games tonight on Playing God. As per the always, I'm Nick Logie, and with me is Xander. I write a dissertation for every session. Nolan.
Hey, man.
We're going to be talking about giving out money, consumables, and permanent items in this episode. So let's go ahead and talk cold hard cash. How much sweet, sweet gold do you hand over to your players, Xander? And how do you decide what is enough and when to fork it over?
Well, one of the things that I've come to understand about divvying out gold specifically is that you can fluctuate your economy up and down to sort of deal with the fact that a lot of gold is going to be inherently problematic. That said, adventurers have a very specific set of things that they look for. Now, if you're running a dark, true grit game where it's, money is going to be really tight and you're going to have to worry about whether or not you have enough money to buy food and travel expenses and stuff like that, then obviously handing out a ton of gold is really going to put a damper on that kind of scene. However, if you're running a really high fantasy game and you don't want to worry about tracking, do they have food for their travels and blah, 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 all the stuff that a lot of GMs are just like, it's not that big of a deal. Then handing out quite a bit of gold is not that problematic. But balancing what things cost can be a bit of a challenge. I know that one of the things in your game was health potions being so expensive in comparison to average items. And you actually dropped the price down.
When I saw that, I was like, what do you mean like 50 gold for, 2d4 plus 1 or whatever? Mm-hmm. It's like, why is that so fucking expensive? Nobody's ever going to fork out the gold for that. They're just going to fucking short rest or whatever.
Yeah. Well, the thing that you kind of puts you into perspective, if you have like a magic shop or some place that all of the players know they can go to get, special effects, potions, magic, and stuff like that, that's where they're going to spend the majority of their loot. So if you want to, let's say, have a short list of all of the stuff that the shop owner will have on hand, make a couple of things ridiculously expensive but still almost attainable, but a lot of other things that are just a little bit more reasonable, and the creation of some unique magical items and stuff, like not mechanical things, just like a really good example is from Critical Role, the flask that the character not carries around. It's just an endless flask of liquor. It doesn't pose an actual mechanical benefit to the character. So things like that, things that add flavor and context for a character, are really great ways to give a player a sense of purpose for the things that they do, and they are more likely to spend their gold pieces on things that are like that. So a lot of gold isn't always a bad thing, but giving out too many magical items, that is definitely a thing that's problematic for
So,
me. Anyway.
like, depending on the theme of the game, this is a problem I pretty much only see in D&D, and it is the weird value that gold has.
Yeah,
Because most of the shit that you just get for adventuring is super cheap, like copper and silver. But in order to get anything of like substance, you have to fork over a lot of gold to whoever the shop owner is. Which,
yeah,
depending on like, if you're not, no matter what setting it is, high fantasy or low fantasy, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense for just the world's economy. Like, there's this guy who runs a magical shop down the road, and he has like all these things for thousands of gold, but he's also the adventuring shop, so he's like, "Well, go over to the discount bargain section over there. You'll get all this shit for like 1 gold, like a whole pile of loot or whatever." And it's like, who other than like adventurers who are really like making some mad cash, like, where's this guy getting the stuff from? Who is he buying it
yeah,
from adventurers? Where's he getting the gold then? Is he
yeah.
adventuring first? Well, like that just kind of raises so many questions on like why is this valued the way it is? That's why I reduced the cost of the health potions because it a health potion just inherently, if it's something which I've kind of made it a little easier to make, like in the setting or whatever, uh, so that way be more plentiful because it's just a thing that people should be able to get access to. Still a little pricey, so that way it's um, something that you have to actually like. It feels like it hits your pocketbook, but
Yeah.
if you buy 1 health potion for, I reduced it to 10 gold in my game.
Yeah, 10
Uh,
gold is still a lot of money for the average guy. Like, you're probably going to save up for quite a while to have a health potion that, you know, let's say you're a boxer or something like that. Like, you put quite a bit of gold in the fact that you're going to need some healing at some point in time. So, yeah, like it makes sense to drop it down, but
but it seems like a lot of
yeah.
like things that cost money, like regardless of whether it's just a mundane item or if it's a big magical item, it just seems like the world is banking on effectively gambling. Like you go to the city and there's this guy who goes, "I've been a shop owner for 10 years," or like some traveling merchant or whatever. Like they have to get really lucky to have an adventuring party that has the money to be like, "Here's I don't know, 5,000 gold for this staff that you've been carrying around for years because nobody else can afford it, and you don't know how to use it because you're not a mage." It's like
Yeah. See,
he's
when
the oh
go
sorry,
ahead.
I was gonna say like just by having something an item like that, and I know you've seen this in like as players do this. He's just like somebody who has something like that is just a target. Like why
Oh
pay
yeah.
for it? Just go and
Yeah.
steal the shit out of it, or like you're a level 1 merchant. I'm just gonna pop you in the head and then take your all of your shit, not just the one
Yeah.
thing.
See, the way that I kind of get around that mentality is the where the place that you go to get magical items and things like that. That person is a powerful mage. Like they have the ability to make them. That's where they come from. So all of the gold and everything it's in for it's like taxes and things like that go to him for research purposes, but he also sells magical items on the side, stuff that he just tinkers with and creates. And that provides enough context for the characters to think, "Oh, okay, well it makes sense that he would have, a staff that shoots fireballs out of it because he's a friggin' wizard."
hmm But
And
then you got
also,
to question why the
yeah.
fuck does he need the money?
Well, the idea that he might need cash to create other magical items because a lot of things that like that require a certain amount of components and things like that. So if he wants to cast a lot of spells or he wants to be able to do XYZ experiments or create things, he's got to have a lot of components, and those components cost money and mad money too.
hmm
So he might make them on the side just so he can get enough cash to do his experiments and stuff.
So I know I keep poking holes in this, but it's stuff that kind of bothers me, especially about Dungeons and Dragons. Firstly is why do you need some of these magical components or for spellcasting if all you have to do is get an arcane focus or whatever the other thing is, the whatever lets you bypass the components that are consumed. It's like, well, there's one thing, and then the other thing is if he does keep cranking out these magical items even as a hobby or whatever, then wouldn't the inherent value of these things decrease as supply rises and demand lowers?
Well, it's D&D. I
I know
guess.
that's what I'm saying. Like
Uh,
I get it from a fantasy standpoint. Like you want to have
yeah,
gold worth something, uh, which is why I like systems that either use um, like a single value currency, like Shadowrun, where there's no divisions of it. It's just 1 new yen is 1 new yen, and things are
yeah,
kind of and things are appropriately expensive. Like you're getting enough money that you could buy the sweet augmentations if you save up for it, but but even like you got to think about using that money to pay rent and take care of other mundane stuff that still matters. Like you got to buy bullets and shit. Like
yeah. Milk runs.
in D&D, you want fucking a million arrows? Here's 2 gold. You have infinite ammo, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely a balancing act with Dungeons and Dragons specifically. Just to make gold worth something to the players because you want to give them something cool. But you also want to give them some pocket change to go and, like
Yeah,
you don't know what you're going to use this on. You might not carry it around for the rest of your campaign. You don't know. But it's good to give it some weight. But the issues that really arise is indeed with that price difference. It's like the stuff the average person needs to survive costs maybe a copper a day. If you want to splurge the silver for like a small
ooh,
feast, your paycheck for the month might be 10 gold. So
yeah. Like
that's what it is. But
so,
then
with giving
armor's freaking expensive too.
right, yeah, exactly. So even if you have gold being weighted, and if you ignore all my nitpicky like fucking macroeconomic bullshit, then you still have an issue that I see a lot. It's the players take out a villain. We'll say for example we'll say like level 3 or 4. That's where we're at, and they kill
All
this
right.
villain, and you get like I mean a substantial amount of money. You've completed like an arc of the story. It's maybe list. I don't want to list any specifics, but let's say you get a lot of money. Later on down the road, as you get higher level, like the lower amount of gold that you would normally receive in order to have the game feel like gold has a value, like a real value to it,
Yeah.
becomes obviously far less satisfying because you had the big payday, and now why are you working for pennies by
Yeah.
comparison?
Yeah. That's honestly where the idea of having magical objects and things like that, like consumables, like one shot, like a potion or a scroll or glyphs and stuff like that. That's where those really start to add weight. So you may only have like 400 gold worth of stuff at level 5 for the dungeon, and 500 gold. Hey, hey, that's quite a bit of cash, but it's not that big of a deal. Whatever. But these scrolls, man, whoa! Like I can cast Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion 3 times. This is great. So one-shot items would be the logical next step.
Right. Of course, that's the case. And w- I was just trying to think of like if you have like all this gold, and the goal is to give the players the gold so they can go buy the consumables. Why not just give them the consumables to begin with?
Well, see, that's usually where I go with it. Is the majority of the loot that they'll have will be, little kitschy things like the stuff from the trinket table for 5e, paint sets, things like that. Things that are interesting but not necessarily useful. A little bit of pocket change, 10, 20 gold, because, a cultist isn't going to have like 500 gold sitting around in the bag.
I don't
Uh,
know. Maybe
but
they
they might,
do. Maybe they
but
maybe they sold one magic item to an adventurer and now they're rich.
yeah, so just set up for life. Uh, but they might be carrying around a small bag with these little stones in it that give them the ability to cast a specific spell on it once per day or something like that. You know, that's where those that's where I go with it. I give them the stuff directly so that I don't have to worry about them going and trying finding it or buying it. Because what if they don't go to the magic shop to buy these things, but I balance my encounters later on to include these kinds of things? I just
Yeah.
give it to them
Well,
directly.
there's a couple things that maybe you could try doing to make gold inherently more valuable. So even if you give the players like this potion or whatever, or just some gold to go to this magic shop that apparently just exists somewhere, um, settings that have low magic that would have a maybe bigger strain on the pocketbook of the players. But one thing you brought up armor earlier, and that's
Yeah,
something that I wanted to talk about a little bit too, because in most games, at least in the traditional rule set, if you're not doing any like homebrew stuff or house ruling, then once you buy armor, you're pretty much set, other than like enchanting it or whatever the hell. Similarly, weapons too. So you're not going to find an adventurer who needs to save up money to buy a new sword because the other one broke.
yeah,
Just with the rules as written, that's not an issue that you ever have to worry about. Even if you get hit by with like 10 million damage, your armor's still fine once you get back up.
yeah. And that's actually one of the things that I had uh, kind of hit a roadblock with um, in my previous campaign to the one that I'm running now. And spoiler alert to my players, I'm just creating a tally mark of like natural ones that you make with a specific weapon, or times that you're hit, and eventually those items that you have purchased and taken care of, and if you are diligent in play as a character with the care of these items and the armor and all the stuff that you have, then the likelihood of something breaking or being useless to you is pretty low. But uh, making sure to do those things is really important, and I want to put emphasis on caring for yourself as a character because it's realistic, and
Yeah,
this game's more grimdark. So if they roll a natural one twice in a row with that sword, it might break on them. It's
yeah,
a
like
it's a higher low kind of thing.
that's a way you can kind of help bring a value to both gold and just the role play of taking care of your shit. Like maybe your armor degrades, maybe your weapons break. An example that I have is this actually is from a video game, and the first Baldur's Gate, which is based off of AD&D anyway, so it has the same mechanics, just it's on a
Yeah.
computer. Um, they have weapon breaking in that game. It's because there's an iron shortage in the setting. If you crit, like if you roll nat 20, the sword breaks or the weapon or the axe or whatever the hell.
Oh
Uh,
damn!
yeah,
Really?
because
Shit.
well, I mean, think about it. You roll up, you have this fucking battle axe. You're the dwarfiest dwarf who ever dwarfed. You raise it up, you get a nat 20, you fucking annihilate whoever you just hit. Like you just swung that motherfucker for like a shitload of force behind it, and since it's an iron weapon, and like you just smack the shit out of this dude, the weapon just breaks, and you're like, oh fuck, you're holding the haft, and you're like, I don't have an axe to that I bought recently. We need to make a special trip to town in order to get replacement weapons.
Yeah. And that kind of thing actually would be a great way to draw players towards new locations and things like that. Like, running around as murder hobos, that's, all well and good for the right game setting. But if they don't have a reason to make a stop to go and talk to the armorer about having new armor made,
Or
then
even armor repaired.
there's a little less life in the game, and adding those little things offers the opportunity for really great role play. So,
And even though I've never
you know,
introduced like a armor break mechanic or anything in any of the games I ran, it would be a good excuse to have the players to fucking take off their armor. one of the huge things I see in any system, no matter if it's D&D or whatever the hell, is somebody puts on like their plate mail, and then you can never, like as a GM, you can never fight them uh, with it off, because like for some reason they sleep in it, which
I
like
don't
you
know if
could
you've ever tried to sleep in plate mail,
you
but it's not
you fucking it's
doable.
not you well it's doable, but you do not get good sleep out of it though.
Yeah, no, you do not get a long rest.
Which so like some games or GMs will include like fatigue and stuff like that for like
Yeah.
sleeping in your armor, which makes sense. And like if you get ambushed in the middle of the night, are you wearing your fucking armor? Like is or like even if maybe more uh in a more safe location, like you're in an inn in the center of a town. Are you're going to bed in your studded leather armor? Why?
Yeah.
This is just how you are? Are you this paranoid at home? Uh,
Yeah, no. No, no you're not.
like
Like
you retire to a castle. You're level 20 and you're sitting there. You're sitting on like your huge pile of gold and you're like, I'm gonna go take a nap. And you like fucking put on your spiked horn helmet. You like step into your fucking enchanted plate mail and then you go take a fucking breather.
yeah, like that's one of the things that really helped like say a barbarian or a monk. That's what makes them really shine is those moments where they don't have to wear armor because their constitution plus their strength or their dex plus their wisdom. Those things give them the ability to be lethal at any moment in time.
Yeah.
And because of that, the paladin is always wearing his plate mail. It really kind of it draws how awesome that is for that character. Not only do they not have to wear armor, they don't have to worry about putting it on. They are
Yeah.
battle ready from the moment they
And
wake up.
if you're a fucking monk, you don't even have to pick up a weapon. You just start punching
Yeah, you
people.
start beating the crap out of people for no reason at all.
I mean,
Well,
I
there's
actually
a
tried to
reason, so.
make that like a thing that I was showing in at least for the NPCs like Keljin and Daikatana. Like in the middle of the night, if you're under attack, Keljin like wakes up, he stumbles out of bed, he's like, "Uh-oh, we're under attack." He's like shirtless or whatever, and then he casts mage armor on himself. So like that's his
Yeah.
first action. It's uh-oh, we need to get prepared. Or when like Daikatana wore chainmail and he fucking got ambushed and he's like, oh no, it takes him like 5 minutes to get it on, so he instead just grabs a sword, goes out and starts just killing people with AC like 12 or whatever.
Yeah. Like that's one of those things that as a GM you have to really kind of poke your players for. I have exceptionally like dedicated players. I'm lucky to have that. And they typically do say, hey, I'm taking my stuff off or I'm getting ready for bed, and that's the cue that they're winding down. They're not wearing their stuff all the time, but that's a really big issue, and you got to kind of poke at your players on a regular basis just to get them to do those things because that's important. It's realistic.
Yeah, and
And
if you're in that situation and you have like some of this other loot that we're talking about, like maybe a potion of, I don't know, stone skin or something like that, or a
yeah,
scroll of whatever the hell gives you armor, then you can
mage armor.
yeah, you can use those. Like it's a good excuse to use those because it's going to save your life.
Hmm.
You don't have to worry. Like as a player, I like using this stuff because otherwise I always feel like I'm hoarding everything and like I feel like a dragon. Like I'm never using the stuff that I get, especially when it comes to like potions, because a lot of times those are dealt out or like available so seldomly that by the time you get to use them, it's like, am I doing this at the right time? Like, is this potion of flying I have like appropriate now, or should I hold on to it for later? I am about to die, but I wonder if I can get out of this situation without using it. And
Yeah.
just having the excuse to use the cool items that you get is satisfying in and of itself, I
Oh,
think.
absolutely, absolutely. Um,
And I usually after so this is the way I do it because after a while gold really does kind of become pretty much pointless for everything except the really expensive shit.
yeah.
And so after a while I'll still divvy out gold. I'll always divvy out gold. People like the money. People like the ka-ching and the the cash. But I basically just start including cool potions and scrolls and other shit just as a part of this loot horde or just random shit. Like it kind of takes the idea that you presented where you get like these magical trinkets or baubles or whatever that do a certain thing, um, but make it a little more frequent and varied, so that way it's not like you have to spend 500 gold on this interesting but overall like mechanically useless thing. Um, and instead you can just get like a potion, and then you're like, oh hey, another potion. Maybe double down on some of the effects, so that way if somebody has like a potion of dark vision and you give them another one, then it doesn't have to feel so wasteful if you are going to pound one back when you think you need it instead of holding on to it forever.
Yeah, and that does offer the opportunity um, to let your players come up with creative solutions to complex issues. And it really takes the opportunity as a GM to sit back and watch how your players are going to interact with this particular encounter, and giving them like a dozen or so different methods by which to defeat the foe or deal with the trap or the problem that's in front of them is a really good way to reward the players as well. And let's say, for example, you're running a game and there's no rogue. How are they going to deal with traps? Traps are still going to be a thing. Like, if there's a trap in one D&D game that you have a rogue and you don't put traps in the new one, why? Like, there's going to be traps. There's going to be things that are going to cause problems. But giving your players the opportunity to look for a solution other than we need to hire a rogue to run around with us, which I think we actually did uh, in your game early on. We hired a halfling guy to go with us to deal with sneak and stuff.
Yeah, that's right. You had to give him money when money was a thing that you had to pay attention to.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
I actually forgot about that up until you just mentioned it. But I mean, that's a way to bring value to gold. If you need to have like a certain skill set that you just don't have,
yeah,
then maybe consider hiring an NPC. Or like, if you have like oh hey, here's an idea. If you have like a lot of loot and you want to take that to your safe house or like your home base or whatever the fuck, then maybe consider hiring a caravan guard, and you'll have to
yeah,
pay some decent cash because it's clearly a valuable thing that they're transporting, and you
oh
also
yeah,
don't want them stealing it from you. So
yeah.
you just
Uh,
give them some money.
Another way to help soak up, like to give a lot of gold, but then soak up some of that cost, is to give the players a space, to give them a solid, tangible location that this is their home base. This is the castle that they had to rebuild to XYZ or whatever. But they have to pay the help that live and work there. They have to pay the stable kid. They have to pay the guy that keeps the place clean. They've got to pay to have someone deal with messages and stuff that come requesting their help when they're not there.
Hmm.
And that's a really good way to give your players a sense of like a single location is important to them because it's their space and that's their place. I know I did that with the game that I was running with you, Jess, and Bobby.
Yep.
You
And
guys,
we got some
yeah,
cool stuff. Like we got cool stuff that wasn't just money or mechanical stuff or even magical shit. But it was like one of the reward that I wanted in play, like from David Bowie. Uh,
from the Goblin
I
King, yeah,
wanted his fucking cool rug. Like
yeah,
it wasn't even magical. It was just a cool looking rug. And for this like quest that we needed to do. And I got the rug, and then it showed up in the home base castle, and that was
yeah,
neat.
yeah. That's a really great way to put perspective for your characters is to do stuff like that. Give them a home base, give them a not just like an inn that they sleep out of or whatever. And if you're keeping them in a centralized location, then let them have a structure that they can call their own. Let them build a farm. Let them deal with those problems of being landlords or whatever.
Yeah, it's one of the great things
And
about Shadowrun, because even if you're paying for rent, which is part of the mechanics of the game, then
yeah,
it's like, well, you have a home base that you can frequently return to because you're living there. You
hmm
can customize it with all the cool shit that you've stolen or illicitly purchased. Um, and it's, especially in a game that's more uh, confined to like a city or a
yeah,
local area, then you can pretty much always return there and enjoy your spoils.
yeah,
With D&D, obviously, since you're murder hobos a lot of the time, then you're
yeah,
fucking off to far away lands, and you're like, am I ever gonna get back home? And
yeah.
sometimes you
Now,
just can't enjoy what you find.
now that does raise a lot of questions that I've gotten, and I've actually asked quite a few different times. In the respect of having a returnable location, a really good example of that is Elrin. Like, Elrin is a place that we keep revisiting and keep going back to. Same thing with the Grinning Fox, for Jess's character, because these are important locations. That's their home. That's where they come from. And letting the players return to that location after a major story arc, or say one of them gets gravely wounded and you have to have them resurrected. They've got to go back to the certain place to get resurrected in the first place, and so it's going to take time for them to get back up. So it offers a lot of mobility and things.
Yeah.
So even
And
if
if
your characters are murder hobos, you can still have that structure. It's just they're not going to visit it quite as much.
Right, and you can also, the way I did it in Latir, and is like have a few permanent locations you can go to. But also, if you have something that you can store your shit in on the go, maybe like I don't know, a sand ship or an airship, or if you're going more lower fantasy, maybe you have like this big Oregon Trail style wagon that you keep all your stuff in when you're not delving into dungeons, and that you could include a cool NPC that helps, maybe like a navigator or something, helps guide the players to another location if they're like stumped on where they want to go, or if you're trying to like kind of push the story in a certain direction. Then you can take all their shit with them and also have them like depart from that wagon and go
Oh
do
yeah.
whatever the hell else they want to do.
Now, still in that vein, like when your characters are traveling around and they have their wagon and things like that, the random encounter in the middle of the night, it's a classic D&D trope, and it's a really good one. You get attacked by bandits in the middle of the night.
Hmm.
Uh, Also including things like structures, like you return back from a mission that you had went on for this noble lord on the other side of the nation that you live in, to find that your house has been looted completely and nobody knows what the hell fuck happened.
Yeah,
Like, your
you didn't
guys,
hire any guards.
yeah, because you didn't hire any guards. There's consequences, one, for the choices that your characters have made, and two, if you do have a guy, then the guy's dead. Like, he's just
Yeah,
laying there in the middle of the floor when you return home. All your stuff is gone, and now you have a
that
motivation to go and
immediately
do
gives
it.
you personal plot
Yeah,
because it's like, who the fuck
immediately.
did this? We're gonna get them. And even if it isn't like just explicitly stealing your shit, like, or you come home to find your butler's dead, or in the case of Shadowrun again, because this is a great example, when uh, Doublejack fucked up in a little bit when he was trying to hack from his hideout, and the mega corporation managed to trace it back. When he returned there, we had that scene where
Yeah.
all of his
Oh man.
homies were dead, and like a couple escaped, and like the fucking the Black Knight, who is like a badass in the Matrix, is like just a kid in real life, and he's like, they got us. They came here, and then he like died in his arms, and like that gave him a shitload of motivation. Uh,
That motivation that eventually led
and then one
to
thing led to another, and
blows up Mexico.
the worst nuclear strike on Mexico ever.
He literally rides a fucking nuclear warhead to destroy Mexico.
Yep, that's a summary for you.
But giving your players a place to put their stuff and their loot and what have you, and make it a structure that has meaning to them is a really good way to reward them. Say you don't want to give them out a bunch of gold because gold is really hard to come by, but the noble has got to reward them for killing all of the rats down in the cellar, so he gives them a dilapidated house on the edge of town.
Yeah,
Just
or
says, here,
like a
you
deed
have
to a
this.
place that. Oh, hey, I got an idea.
Yeah.
A deed to a place that's haunted, and then
Oh, that's so good.
and then you
That's a
go
good
then
one.
you go to the fucking place, and it's like, oh shit, look at this mansion. This is awesome. Oh, those are ghosts. We need to
Now
deal
we
with
gotta
that.
fucking deal with ghosts. So like that's a really good reward. It costs gold to maintain, and it doesn't necessarily have to be uh extravagant.
And
The players will take care of it themselves.
right.
So
And a physical
yeah,
location also lets them get creative with how they structure it. Maybe they take this mansion that they've cleared out of the haunt and add a secret cellar or an arcane enchanted room where the mage can practice his nonsense without worrying about killing everybody else in the town. Or like whatever the players can decide. Like it opens up like a great area for creativity and just doing pretty much whatever you want.
yeah. A really good example of that would be like I think it starts without numbers, right?
Stars without a number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your characters are flying around on spaceships and stuff. That spaceship is important. It has a holodeck. It has all those things, and it's unique to the character. So taking that idea that they have a place that they live in, and that this is where they spend the majority of their time, that's a physical location in Dungeons and Dragons, is a great thing to do. I suggest it. Wholeheartedly agree.
And you could either hire people or like buy cool things just to put in it, and then that's a way to spend your gold.
Yeah, it's a way to give gold more meaning because that tapestry may be 50 gold because it was hand spun, but that tapestry is going to be hanging on the wall in your character's freaking bedroom that every time they go to see their place, it's there. And they can revisit the memory of all that. So,
That's right. And
yeah.
then and it turns out that they actually use stone shape to create a room behind that tapestry and nobody knows about it and they can
Oh,
go hang out there.
yeah. Jess, there you go.
There you
Create
go.
a room.
But
Um,
with since we've talked about like customizing a place, a lot of times players will seek that out and like be there like that's their own creative thing. But as a GM, obviously something that isn't so prevalent in 5th edition, but is more for like earlier editions or Pathfinder things of that nature, giving like permanent magical items. Enchanted armor,
yeah.
the flaming sword of destruction, the double barrel frost shock shotgun that I randomly rolled in one of my Pathfinder games at like level 3 that broke the game.
Oh yeah. Well, magical items are a weird thing. For Pathfinder 3.5, older editions of Dungeons and Dragons, if you did not have +5 magical scimitars at level 15, there was no freaking way you were gonna survive.
Yeah, there's so many
Like you were
monsters
not taking things down.
that like had just immunity to mundane weapons that
Yeah.
it's like you just can't do anything without seeking this stuff out. It was built into the game to that as part of player progression. In 5th ed, it's more of a dessert to have with your game because players are
Yeah.
already pretty powerful just with their class skills and shit like that.
Yeah. Now that
Uh,
said, it is really important once you get to about 5th or 6th level to give them something that they can do because the monsters start being immune to mundane stuff then too. So keep that in mind as well,
well,
future GMs.
and adventuring just for the fun of adventuring does only go so far. Like if you're not feeling like you're finding anything, like you kill a dragon and there's just no loot, then I
Yeah,
mean,
like we
on
we
an
we
out of
made
play
out like
level, that kind of feels just a little shorthanded.
yeah, like we made out like bandits after discovering Chrysodone's horde. And we gave a lot of it away. Like a lot of the artifacts and stuff like that went to um uh the Arcology League, I think it was.
Archaeology League.
Archaeology League, yeah. So yeah, like a lot of it went away, but we still got a hefty chunk of change, and we're still spending out of that to this day now. Like
Yeah.
we've bought all kinds of cool stuff, but
Well, with the back to the stupid macroeconomics thing, like uh, I had to think of what kind of economy that is now that there's a suddenly an assload of gold that has been poured back into the system. But since we've talked about gold already, when you give people items, whether and we're gonna focus on fifth ed because there's a lot of options for it. You got like the big permanent legendary items. You got
mhm.
just magical trinkets that don't do very much mechanically, but can still be very powerful. You have what you were mentioning earlier, which is the cool, flavorful stuff. Um, how and when would you give something like a staff to a player?
Well, the way I have come to understand the giving of magical items is the first thing. Don't I I am guilty of this on so many occasions. It's terrible of me. I've had to do a lot of soul searching and a lot of learning and get a lot of feedback to really break myself of this, and I still haven't quite got there yet. But don't give your players magical items that will be good for them. Give them magical items that make sense for the setting for where they found it. You're not gonna find a wizard staff +2 to all fire-based spells that are cast using it as a focus in a cave full of trolls. You know,
True, that's true. But what if it is appropriate for your setting? Because this is something I see a lot of GMs do, and I fall into this sometimes as well. It's very easy to say no as a GM when it comes to magical items.
oh
When do
yeah,
you say yes? When do you give somebody the thing that strictly benefits their class? Like, I don't fucking know. Maybe if I give you some kind of brass knuckles of fire and +2 or some shit like that in
which
Legends of
Kenton,
Latir.
which
Like,
Kenton doesn't need at all.
right, exactly.
It's not at
You don't need it, but obviously if it's appropriate for the setting and you put it in the game, the players are going to want the stuff that just makes them better.
Yeah.
So, when do you say yes?
The answer to that is not uh, when, it's how. And that how is very specifically when the players look for it. You're not going to come across one of the legendary violins that bards can use to do amazing shit just walking around.
I'm
You
not
know,
saying walking around. Like
uh,
let's assume that they specifically quest for it because I think that's what you're getting at, right?
yeah, yeah, specifically questing for those items. Like, they know that they have to come up against a big bad guy, and the plot is starting to thicken, and they know that this big bad thing is coming, or they've got a journey that they've got ahead of them, so they've got to prepare, and that preparation can be a lot of research into, all right, what kinds of things are there out there? What kind of things could I use? And knowing how they are as a character, they're going to look for things that are going to benefit them. And so when they do that research, drop little hints like, you've read about a long time ago that there was this violin that this bard used. He was a great bard. He was wonderful. It was absolutely fantastic. But he seemed to have so much more power than he looked like he should have. And that little tiny nugget of information will cause them to go looking for, okay, what's the thing called?
Hmm.
Once they figure out what it's called, all right, now where was it last seen? Who would know? And so that introduction of new NPCs, introduction of a dungeon crawl or new locations, or some kind of political thing because maybe it's owned by a king and he don't want to give it up, you know.
Hmm.
So to give the items that are specifically beneficial to the players, uh, I think should be limited to when they're going to look for it. Now, totally give them the opportunity to know that it exists in the first place, so they
Yep.
will go look for it. But that information needs to come at a time when you're prepared to implement that as a GM because magical items like that specifically benefit a character, like an entire class, they're really good. Like I cannot put enough emphasis on that. They're really good.
But yeah, you gotta focus on how this might affect the long term and
Oh
how it
yes.
affects
Oh
the
yes.
balance, the inter-party balance, so one person doesn't seem suddenly more powerful than everybody else,
Yeah.
and then everybody else is like, why are we even in this fight when you could just handle it yourself? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
The way I like doing it is to give every single magical item you find, no matter if it is a +1 dagger or the decanter of endless water, a story and a meaning to be in the setting. Uh,
Absolutely.
because what you just said, you guys did in my game.
Oh yeah. Well, we
You
knew we were going to the desert.
you
We
knew
had
you
to
were
have
going to a
water.
fucking infinitely long desert that nobody has returned from. Well, or they have returned from, but they couldn't find anything because they ran out of supplies and had to turn around. But
Yeah.
you're
Funny
like,
thing
okay,
is,
we need to fucking find a way to survive out there. So we remember that there was like this hint in this dungeon we'd previously visited where it might be here. And then you went to go investigate it. Turns out there was a whole nother layer to the dungeon you didn't even notice
yeah.
before.
Yeah, we're like, yeah, well, shit, that's a thing now. So yeah, the really, really powerful magical items, totally, totally, have it be they're questing for it.
I
Um,
I also just like giving stories to the things, even if it is something you just kind of find even randomly,
oh
uh,
yeah,
just because it makes things a little more interesting as a whole. Like even that shield that you guys found,
yeah,
um, that had like its own tale to it. Because like if you find it on a dead adventure, like what was the adventurer's story? Just some
yeah.
random
Like,
guy who just happened to have a sweet shield. Uh,
no, fucking, of course not. He's got a sweet shield because, you know, he was a badass at one point. He just happened to draw his card. You know, uh, another thing to watch out for when balancing magical items is to think about the magical items from a realistic standpoint. Take your characters and look at their sheets, look at their abilities, look at how those things operate, and think about what you have as a GM prepared for the next session, the next 5, and the next 6. Look at your master plot and really analyze what exactly are they going to be coming up against. Now, it can be, just general broad strokes. We're not asking you to plan out 20 levels in super
yeah, Mr.
meticulous detail.
Dissertation.
uh, but you should at the very least know where your story is going to go, and if you know that, then you can come to a certain kind of place. A +2 to a monk's dexterity
Oh,
can
that's fucking crazy.
can be the difference between an encounter being difficult for the entire party or a complete
Or just trivial as shit.
just completely trivial, because that +1 to their dex gives them bonus to their AC, bonus to hit,
Bonus to the
to their
damage,
damage.
because 5th ed you don't use strength for
Yeah,
that anymore. Well,
yeah,
I mean, unless you're using strength to attack, so
yeah.
you don't have to worry about
Finesse
balancing that.
weapons and stuff.
Yeah.
But that +1 can mean a lot, and if that's just the stats, that's just the things that make the character who they are, and your 5th level, your 10th level, when you get those stat increases, those things add up over time. And a magical item that offers a +2 to strength, also a +2 to charisma, also you can cast fly 3 times a day at will with no preparation and no spell components. Boom! You've taken an entire character and made them nigh undefeatable for the power level that they should be at based
Yep.
on everything else.
GG,
So,
there goes the thread of the plot for
yeah,
like
it's
5 levels.
totally done. Like you've got to be thinking about these things, and that was my really big breaking point from my last campaign. Was fairly early on, because I knew this game was going to be continent hopping. Like they were going to go a lot of places, visit a lot of NPCs, and they needed a way to get around that was realistic and not going to take them forever.
Hmm.
And because I don't want to do 15 perception checks per time you go from one town to the next. I want you guys to get there, because that's where the plot's at. So I gave them a carpet of flying. Let me tell you this: giving your players a carpet of fucking flying at all is absolutely insane, because it's a carpet,
It's a carpet of flying.
flying. Like, all of the
You know how many
difficult
problems
terrain.
can be solved by flying?
Yeah, a lot, a whole lot, an incredible amount of a lot, like a lot of problem. Like, oh man, no, difficult terrain for dungeon
No problem.
crawls. Done. There's a 15-foot gap that you guys would have to cross using ropes and
Just
a
fucking
lot
get
of
on the carpet.
teamwork and shit. Now, whoop, done.
Oh, you got this, you had this encounter set up where you have aerial enemies who are going to attack the ground-based party, like the guy, like the barbarian who never uses a bow or something like that, and it's like, oh no, just fucking take him up there and you can hit him with the axe anyway.
Yeah. Like, I remember a specific moment when I realized how broken the carpet of flying really was. I had set up a map on Roll20, and it was this rocky hill face with, like, really sharp, steep cliffs that they had to walk down precariously, and then a giant gorge with an obviously rickety rope bridge.
Oh, rest in peace.
And then, bloop!
Then they flew over it.
I brought up the thing. It's like, all right, we're gonna fly over it. Fuck.
Yep.
Right.
There you
Okay.
go.
Well, shit. Yeah. Completely gone. Half a game session worth of preparation on that particular map that was gonna take them a long time to get through. Done. Like,
Yeah, that's
it didn't even take a second. It's like, we got a carpet of flying. We're just gonna go over it.
Yep, it's over.
Fuck. So,
That's why I tried to balance
yeah.
in that one encounter that you particularly liked, I know, in the Underdark, where I added all those spires and shit. So
Yeah.
the verticality of the encounter was an important consideration, and like even though you have wall running and shit, you still had to figure out like how high can I run? If when I jump off to attack this thing, am I gonna plummet to my death? Oh wait, no, that's right. I have slow fall, and then I'm gonna go back up because I have like 1,000,000 movement speed per turn, and then I'm gonna do it again, and then I guess I don't have slow fall for this
I
for
don't
the
have
second
slow fall
attempt,
anymore.
and then splat.
Yeah. Like, I damn near broke my leg falling down because I was like, oh, well, I forgot completely that I should not be jumping from 30 feet.
Yeah, that's not just something humans can normally do.
Normally do, So,
So let's say
yeah.
let's say you give the players the flying carpet.
Oh,
You give them this fucking super shotgun at level 3 that they found in a fucking gelatinous cube for some reason. You, that's what happened. The first question I was asked from one of the players was, "How did this guy lose with this gun?" And I was like, "Oh, wait a minute, hold on. The gelatinous cube surprised him. There you go."
yeah.
Because that's pretty much the only way he could have lost with that gun, because it was
Yeah.
doing like 2d6 additional damage on top of a d12. It was crazy.
Yeah.
But like, let's say you give somebody that, and you realize, this is gonna break the fuck out of my game. But it's too late now. You've already given it to him.
Already given it to him. It's done.
What kind of steps can you take to I don't want to say like negate it, but mitigate certain factors of it?
Well, a couple of things that you can do as a GM. First of all, you are playing God. You can alter things however you see fit, and because of that, you have a lot of power over the way the cosmos, in and of itself, operates. How does magic work? Like, what is the fabric of reality? How do these things interact? What makes magic do its thing?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say they've got to get through this dungeon, and they can't go over it, but they have a carpet of flying, so they don't even need to go in. They can just poof right over the top of it. Well, problematic is the only way to get there is the key that they need to get into the castle that they can clearly see they could fly up to if they want to, but they're never going to get into the 15-foot solid thick stone doors that needs magic to open it. No, you got to go into the dungeon to get the key. Oh, and did I tell you there's an anti-magic field on the inside? Your magical items are not working. Your bag of holding pukes everything up. Like,
yeah, you can
it
you could put
creates a
anti-magic
problem.
fields. You could put charges on items that normally wouldn't. Like the flying
Yeah,
carpet only works for, I don't know, an hour a day, or
yeah,
you can only use it like 3 times before you have to find like a magical well or something else to recharge it at.
yeah. Now that's being said, it's a good thing for you to, as a GM. Let's say you screw up and you give them that carpet
That's
of
what we're
flying.
assuming. Yeah, we're assuming
Yeah, so
that you realize you have messed up.
so you can go through the trouble of altering an entire encounter to suit against it. You can make it only have one charge or two charges or whatever. You can also describe how over a certain period of time you see that the magic in it is beginning to wane. Well, that's a problem in and of itself. My flying carpet stopped working for some reason.
Yeah.
So now that creates an entire new plot point. How do I get my magic carpet to work again? Oh, Carpy, I'm
That's
so
kind of what I
sorry.
was getting at when I was
You
saying
know?
charges, because then you got to go find something, and
Yeah,
maybe that something happens to be something that you normally could fly over, but now you can't.
yeah,
um,
precisely. And so,
eh,
uh, but don't punish your players for the mistake. Like I did that, and I got raked over the coals, and rightly so. Because I made the mistake, and I didn't really own up to it, and that's a problem. We're human. We're gonna make mistakes. I'm not the greatest GM on the planet, so
right, so let's go ahead and bring
yeah,
up this topic. Um, and that is, since GMs are people too, and even if you're the player, you want it. As
yeah,
a player and as a GM, can you approach the players and say, I didn't realize this was going to completely break the game. This is
mhm,
going to completely nullify, like, I don't know, half the encounters that I had planned for the next several levels.
yeah,
I want
uh,
to take it away.
yeah. When when you come to that point, because sometimes you got to, like,
There are
it
certain things where you
sucks.
just can't, you really just can't
Yeah.
deal with it on an in-play level.
Um, but when it comes to that point, own up to the fact that you made the mistake in the first place. Say, hey guys, look, I'm a bonehead. I didn't think this was going to cause as much trouble as it obviously already has. I need to take care of this in some kind of constructive way.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, nobody wants to get in that situation because
yeah.
as a GM, it sucks to take something away. But
Oh yeah. Oh my god, it hurts
we
so bad.
need to bring it up because
Yes.
it is sometimes the only solution. I've had to do
Yeah.
that I think twice in my entire GM career, and I felt bad each and every time both times that I've done it because I want them to have the cool thing, but by giving them the cool thing, I've mitigated like some of the more challenge to the game.
Yeah.
Like if you do give somebody the thing that boosts whatever their base stat is by a lot, and then you realize it's like I just I just can't challenge this character anymore.
Yeah. And the rest of the characters, if you do challenge that character, the rest of the characters are
Oh
fucked.
yeah, that's right, the
So
Johannes
yeah.
problem,
Yeah.
where
The Johannes issue.
where the only way I could even hurt him was to do so much damage to him to get through his armor, that it would just insta-gib anybody else I pointed that at.
Oh yeah. Like if you would have hit like double jack or slick with it, we were dead
Yeah,
instantaneously.
yeah, because it was
Uh,
like an absurd amount of damage. It would effectively kill tanks,
oh
actual mechanical tanks, not like the class concept of a tank.
yeah. But yeah, just approach your players. Say, hey, look, guys, this is really breaking. Um, just be honest with them, be open about it, and try your best to make up for that with some other kind of reward,
Right, and as
be
a
it
player, you need to
gold.
recognize that if you're just winning all the time, it's not going to be as fun. So
Yeah,
you need to be like take a step back and be like, okay, you're right. This item's broken as shit. And then the GM, you could be like, here's this thing instead. Like
yeah,
it's obviously not going to be as powerful or anything, but it could be cooler.
yeah. Now, there's also another way to do that, and this adds more plot and more storyline to your game. Let's say you give the characters a carpet of flying. They've got a carpet of flying. Someone is gonna notice the carpet of flying
Oh
that
yeah,
they're
I
floating
was actually
around on.
waiting to get to something like
And
this.
so, let's say the villain has been looking for this carpet of flying for a long time because he needs the magic that's in it to complete the giant monstrosity cataclysm creature to destroy the city of the people that made fun of him when he was a teenager.
That's right.
And
Totally
he
a
needs this
legitimate
carpet of
excuse.
flying. He needs this carpet of flying. Oh, the players have it. Well,
Time to get him.
time to get him. So he comes at you with everything he's got. It just bears down on the top of you. You guys are level 5. This guy's like level 20. Like, him and his army come to you and say,
Yeah, you got a problem.
we want that carpet of flying. And do your players commit suicide by carpet and not give it to him?
Oh, they absolutely will.
They absolutely will. But say they beat the snot out of the players and he takes the carpet. One, the carpet is no longer there in the player's control. Two, it's being destroyed for use as a component in this giant monster creature. Three, now the players are like, who is this fuckhead that just stole our awesome ass carpet? What a dickbag.
Or maybe it's not
'Cause-
necessarily gone. Like
Yeah,
that's now an out of play or in play or both hook to get them to get the fucking item back. Because then
yeah,
by the
like,
time they reach the power level to get the item, then it's appropriate now.
yeah, it won't be broken anymore. That's not a bad way to go about it as well. It's a lot less direct to the players, and when you implement stuff like this, please be careful, because as a dungeon master for any game system, it doesn't matter what it is, this is one of those moments where we like to call it the slippery slope. Once you start to slide, you've got to grab yourself and you've got to hold on and you got to try and think logically about it and think tactically about it and try to predict the players as much as you can. Obviously, you can't a lot, but try to predict what they're going to do and then make sure that the taking of this item doesn't create any backlash onto your players specifically. Not the characters. The characters can be pissed off all they want.
Yeah.
Let your players know it's just a plot device, it's just a plot hook. You know, this is how this is working. Give them hints, drop
Yeah,
little
give them a fair
themes,
shot.
and give them a fair shot to keep the item. So when it comes down to it, you're not, you're not taking something away. You're repurposing it as a plot hook and a plot device, and that's a really easy way to screw things up. But if done right, can be an epic moment for not only your players, but for the game itself. Because they finally get powerful enough to go back and get Carpy, and so they go into the dungeon and they find the guy and they wreck him, and they wreck his giant friggin' monster thing too. Because screw that guy, and they take back Carpet, and so now they've got their carpet of flying again. Yay! They had a purpose and they had a goal. So having that as a plot device is good, but don't let it become a crutch that you lean on.
Yep.
If you do it once, that's fine. Your players are probably not gonna give you too much hell about it, and if you do it well enough, they may not even notice that it wasn't a plot device all along. Like, oh, you planned this from the very beginning, because those moments are great as a GM. Like,
Yep.
you're just like,
Oh my god.
how could you? I thought I came up with this. I thought this was my idea. How did you plan that? So.
And
You
you're
know,
like,
those
I
moments-
totally did that from the very beginning,
From the
shifty
beginning.
eyes.
So it's a totally a great way to go about it. But if you make the mistake again, don't take that route, and don't let it become a pitfall for you.
Right. Don't use it as a crutch. And speaking of villains, and trying to dole out, cool magic items and shit.
Hmm.
If you like take down this villain, whether he's a minor villain or a major villain, and he's got a he's got a cool thing on him, or not on him, like in his like vault or whatever the fuck your loot pile, generic loot pile here. Like, why the fuck wasn't he using the magic item when you fought him?
Yeah.
One of the things that I've implemented before, and maybe we'll implement it again, is that if the villain knows about the players and what they can do and where they shine, maybe the villain, like off screen or whatever, is questing to find a specific magic item in order to like fuck the players up because or negate something major that they can do. And then when
Hmm.
you finally confront the villain, take him down and steal his shit, then you have that cool thing now.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Like, remember that your villain. That's. Uh, I hate to say this, but that's one of your player characters. That's a player character in your game, and that player character has goals. They have aspirations, and I believe that we've actually talked about your villains on several different occasions. Um, that your guy's got to have hopes and dreams, aspirations. What's he doing? Why is he doing it? And he's looking for a way to accomplish his goals. He wants something, and he wants to have a certain end game, and that end game requires X, Y, Z.
Hmm.
So
Or
that,
you can make the
yeah,
magical arms race a part of the plot. It's like,
yeah,
oh shit, we just heard that evil Dickface is going to search for this magical cloak that will basically guarantee his victory. We need to go fucking get it first.
yeah.
And you just like charge along and see, and you can plot out as the villain. They can kind of have an idea of where the villain's progress is. It's like, oh shit, he's 100 miles closer to where we think the dungeon that holds this item is. We need a boogie.
Yeah. Now that goes back to our one of our previous episodes of GM metagaming. Your villain may know something about your players, but you as the GM, you know everything. Don't let your villain have too much meta understanding of your players. Let them have some struggle with it too. Now it's only in your mind, and it's happening behind the scenes. But if you just take a Word document and you go out and say, hey, he's questing for this thing for this reason. This is how long it will take. This is how much in-game time has to pass before he attains it. These are the things he has to do, the steps he has to take, and
You,
put that in your plot.
you
And
can solve that as an in play problem for the villain because
totally,
maybe the villain has this I don't know, amulet of speak with dead or something like that,
mm,
and he doesn't know what your progress is or anything like that yet. You're both going for the same like end game magical item, and then like one of his assassins dies, and then he's like, "What? Why isn't this guy reported back yet?" So he uses that amulet, and the assassin's like, "Dude, they can throw fireballs now," and
yeah.
so
Oh
he's like,
shit, they can
"Oh,
throw
great!
fireballs.
Now
Fuck.
I got to prepare for this."
Yeah.
And
Now
th-
his preparations have changed, and it took him time to go and talk to that assassin too. So just keep in mind that the magical items are going to be things that your NPCs are probably going to want too. In fact, one of the greatest plot hooks in the history of plot hooks to ever plot hook is your character, your player character, has something on them that the villain has heard about and knows about because your players they're gonna flaunt their abilities pretty heavily. Let's not lie to ourselves. They're in it for a
right,
little bit of glory
or like
first.
maybe a consequence for using said item. I'm not saying the One Ring to rule them all, but Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings. So their goal at this point in time is, they're like, well, they've got this thing. Let's send some minions after him and see how they handle. Go and take that. So the trinket that you get at the beginning of the game, that could be a thing. That could be something important to the villain. You never know, and your players won't know until it comes time to tell them. But that's a good way to uh, reward loot and stuff like that too. Is other people are going to notice that they've got it, and a lot of people are going to want to take it from them. So
So Xander, is there
steal.
any kind of item, any magic item, um, specific or like as a maybe like a general like mechanical theme that you would just say, nope, not ever gonna have this in the game? Here,
Uh,
I'll tell you mine. While you think about that, mine is the deck of many things.
oh man, yep.
I did put that in Latier, but that's only because I knew you guys wouldn't draw from it. Because if you did, I mean, terrible things can happen with that, and it's not even like fun terrible things in some of these
Yeah, it's
instances.
all.
It's just like, oh, you died, woohoo! Roll new character. It's like, wow, that was super fun. I love doing that. So it's
Yeah.
like that. There are some things that just probably wouldn't make sense in a lot of campaigns that are like absurdly powerful or like really specific magic items. Like I think the what's it called? Like the Amulet of Ultimate Evil or something like that, which is fucking pointless for normal adventurers because if you're not evil and you pick the damn thing up, you like disintegrate or something like that.
Yeah. Um, I have I have a rather short list. Um, but for fifth edition specifically, the items that I believe that they're too much uh to realistically uh to implement.
Maybe I worded the question a little too strictly. Maybe not ever at the table, but like almost never.
Uh, One of them would have to be um the carpet of flying. Uh,
Seems
and I'm
like you
gonna
had a
keep.
big problem with that one.
I really did have a lot of issues with that fucking carpet of flying. It's just, ugh, man. It's
Anything other than the
that's
carpet? The carpet
um
of break game.
the carpet of break game. Um, I would say that any of the like super epics, like the artifacts in the DMG, just you don't need those. They could be there, but don't give them to your players because why would you do that to yourself? Um, like a really good one is the Iron Hand of Vecna. They're super fucking powerful, and they break the shit out of a game. Now, you
I
guys are like,
mostly yeah, I mostly think of it as like maybe even if you want to put one of those busted ass items in, will putting it in enrich the game? Would it make it more fun? Because what I found in a lot of these is that even as a player, like if I'm given something, the let's say the cape of I win, um,
the
it's just
cape,
like it's just like not fun in a lot of times, especially like
yeah,
early levels where it's like I wanted this monster I'm fighting, even though it is like a fucking I don't know hobgoblin chief or something like that. It's supposed to be, I mean, not impossible, but hard.
yeah,
It's like I worked my way up, but if you have the cloak of I win, then you walk up and you like you smack him in the face, he blows up, and then you win.
yeah, you win. I would also say, now this is a really touchy subject for a lot of GMs and a lot of players too.
Bring it. That's
Uh,
what we're here for.
I would say sentient magical items, unless there's a really good reason for you to have them. They're just they're not really necessary in a lot of respects. It's something you have to keep up with as a GM, which is that's just another thing on your plate to have to deal with. Um,
I guess one
and
option if you have like broken ass items is if you put like one or two in, why not just throw in like a shitload of them at that point, because then they're
Yeah.
not scarce, and then you don't have to worry about like your players picking them up because the enemies have them, the players have them already. Uh, Everybody's busted at that point. The like
Yeah.
do it the way like DC and Marvel do it. So everybody's fucking broken. Just go have fun and do whatever.
Yeah. Go destroy the whole universe. Um, but for fifth edition specifically, um, anything that grants flying is really, really just uh, they're really,
Especially at early
really
levels.
big.
Because when you get past a certain point, you're almost never going to like challenge even like no magic item PCs
Hmm.
with like fall damage, unless it's like you drop them from orbit. Then
Yeah.
it really doesn't matter at that point. So you might as well just give them that, because then you don't have to worry about like doing whole routes, and you can get, and what you said earlier, you can get to the meat. So like at level
Um,
15, give them the magic carpet, and then
yeah.
they're already not dying, or they're already trivializing that cliff that you mentioned earlier. It's like now they're level 15, the mage is like, all right, everybody come here, and then teleports over. So
Yeah.
give them the magic carpet. Like it's not busted at that point.
Yeah. All of these things are relative to their to the level that your players are, especially for fifth
Right.
edition.
But
But
yeah, which is
you
kind of
know,
what this episode's about. So that's
um,
where we're trying to figure out when the like what level do things stop being as busted, or
yeah.
like what level or progress in the story to give them this cool crazy shit.
Yeah. Other things, like things that offer a place for them to stay, like a Daern's instant fortress. That's really, really powerful magical objects. Not only because you have an instant fortress you can carry around in your pocket with a command word,
Hmm.
but let's say you're in a small hallway in a really big dungeon where there's a lot of dudes coming at you all at once. You drop down a little chest piece, and all of a sudden, 10 guys are dead.
Yeah,
It would work.
but I mean
Uh,
that's not much different from I cast a fireball and 10 guys die anyway.
well, that's true, but you know, uh, uh, make it so it's relevant and useful. Um,
And if you're
anything that
already in a
adds
point in the
armor,
story where like random encounters are basically like fucking whatever, we're not even gonna roll them because whatever it is more of a waste of time than anything.
yeah.
Then I remember the exact moment in Legends of Latir when you guys got to that point, and it was when you were marching your army from Elrin to like through the Northlands to the Gnome Dominance, where I looked at it, everybody's like, there's no way that any of these random encounters like in this area could even like try to beat them. So
Yeah, no.
I was just like, you guys travel for a few days. What do you want to do during this travel time? And then even Jesse was like, oh yeah, I see we've gotten past the point where
Random
where we
encounters.
can't do where we don't need to do random encounters anymore.
that, he- yeah, that was one of the funniest moments of the game, actually.
I mean, that's a
Um,
legit part that people get to.
yeah.
It's like, why send even like I don't know, a D100 wolves at somebody if all that's going to do is like
Provide us with
they throw a
pizza
few
eat.
spells that you get to eat at the end of the day, and everybody
Yeah,
eats
that's
really well. And
cooked meat. I
like
do.
even the experience points, if you're doling out like combat experience like that, is like pittance for characters of a certain level. So it's like really just a waste of time,
Yeah. Um,
and it
but
doesn't add
my
anything interesting to the story.
oh yeah, no, totally not at all. Um, but in general, it's the answer is anything that adds armor or shield bonuses to things. Because AC is really good in fifth edition, so a +3 armor to anything is insane. Anything transportation, like the broom of flying, or the carpet of flying, or the ebony fly, or
I'm noticing a lot of the same word being brought up in
yeah,
that
fly.
sentence.
Anything for travel, like teleportation, or like the cubic gate. That's really, really good, and really intense. And oddly enough, the decanter of endless water is a really broken item too. It not only can you use it as a weapon, but you don't have to worry about water ever. Like that's pretty broke. You got to make sure that you
Hmm.
know where that implementation comes
Right,
from.
but that's why I gave it to you guys at like 10th-ish level, because
Yeah.
by that time, water didn't matter. If you have a cleric, like a fucking level 1 cleric even, create food and water, alright, you're done.
The
Level 0 cantrip, fuck you.
yeah, the rod of security. That's a really really good one too. Like we didn't get that till what 14th level, I think.
Yeah, but if you've noticed this already, is that's not a get out of jail free card. Um,
No, it's
because
not.
if I know you saw this in the last game where you guys were like, "Ah, that was such a great, real restful sleep. All right, let's go outside. Why the fuck are there all these enemies out here? Oh Jesus!" And then you turn around and walk back in because it's like, I mean, somebody knows that you're there. You're fucking taking a nap in a dungeon. Like, those guys had the time to come back and be like, "All right, where the fuck are these guys who just like killed a bunch of us? Like, they're around
Yeah,
here somewhere. We know they didn't leave."
somewhere. Where are they?
And even in like an instant fortress or whatever else, like even though you can't like penetrate that as an enemy, because of how the magic and shit works, that doesn't stop the enemies from standing out there and besieging you.
And waiting,
Yeah,
waiting you out because you gotta come out sometime.
yeah, like that magic ain't gonna last forever, and if it does, you're just gonna be in your own prison forever.
Yeah. So yeah, places to sleep, things to provide food and water endlessly, things to fly, things to transport you. Those are the game-ending, game-breaking items. And anything with armor. Oh my god. Like I was like a fraction of a second away from giving +2 plate mail to a fighter. And I realized like a moment later, I'm like, oh no. No, 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 no. This dude will have a 22 freaking AC. Nope.
That's
Like,
in a lot of ways it's not the worst because in fifth ed at least, and especially games like Pathfinder and Starfinder, the uh, the enemies have such a good to hit that
yeah,
even at a 22, it's not unreasonable that you're gonna get hit. It's just harder, and um, that's that's kind of the fun of it as well. Like as a monk, when you fucking use your haste thing and you have AC 20 and you took the dodge action, then doesn't it feel good to be like have uh let's say like 30 enemies like fire a hail of arrows, and after you catch like 5 of them, then the other ones are just like missing. You're like Matrix dodging the whole time. That's fun, right?
yeah, that's totally fun. That's absolutely awesome.
Yeah, and that's fun for me too because you get to have fun and I get to throw a fucking assload of dice at you and like maybe a couple of them get through, which they do
Yeah,
sometimes. And so it's not like I'm doing nothing to you, but you feel like the badass you should be at level 14.
yeah, yeah. I guess I can see how the +2 wouldn't be quite as bad, but
Cuz remember,
when
the
you're
goal the
talking
goal
loot
ain't to
boxes,
fucking kill your players.
yeah, no, no, don't. You are not at a con. If you're at a con and your goal is GM versus players, fine, do that.
Oh,
Murder them all you
by the
like.
way, it's called Meat Grinder. That's the thing I was trying to think of like a couple episodes
Ah,
ago. Like
God, okay.
you make it a PC and they walk into this dungeon and it's very crunchy, and then the GM's like, "All right, you fucked up and got hit by like 8 traps in a row. You're dead."
You're done.
That's like that. The Meat Grinder is the thing that you do at conventions.
Ah, all right.
Now I want to touch on these last two things real quick before we sign out. Um, the first, I'm just going to bring this up real quick because I've never done this myself, but I know a couple GMs who have done it, and it's the last thing I put on our little note thing there, Xander. Loot boxes.
Yeah.
Like the way, since I haven't done this, I had to ask him how he did it, and the way he did it was like you get like a few items, like you have like this table that you can roll from or whatever, and you include like a couple mundane items, like maybe I don't know, leather vest, um, a silver axe, and then something good
Mm.
or something like that, and then you actually present the players this as like an in-game box like a lotto
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And even though video
A little
game
loot crate.
developers are getting their asses chewed out about that right now, um, it's something you can do. I think that's a lot of work, so I'm not going to do it. And I think having the more customized um, personal flavor added to the game is more rewarding both for the players and me as a GM. But it's something I wanted to bring up because it is an option.
Yeah, I really like them because even if your players don't go there, that box is still there. So if they, for whatever reason, decide to revisit this place, the box is still there, still tempting. No,
And if they don't
and
know
you
what's
know
in
what's
it,
there.
then they don't know what's in it, and you got like a couple cool items that you know they'll like, then they don't have to get them immediately, and then they maybe find another box later on in it, and you can just reuse the same list, and they won't know. It's a
Yeah,
mystery.
yeah, it's totally a mystery. And if they never pick the box, ugh, that's irritating. But what I get it,
Yeah, I would definitely have that as something you'd bring up before you start running a game, just to make sure people would actually have fun doing it, because
Oh yeah,
that's probably not something I'll ever do.
yeah. But loot boxes are fun sometimes. Now I don't make super use of them though.
And then the final thing that for like, this is a magical thing, because I don't really understand it, and I know you wanted to tell me this before we started recording, but what the fuck is a glyph?
Oh, glyphs. That's right. Okay, so imagine for a second you have to have an item to give your players that gives them the ability to do stuff and it's cool loot, but you're having trouble coming up with something that's not going to break or bust your system. A glyph is effectively just like the glyph of warding spell or the glyph spell from 5th Ed. It's a spell that is stored within a physical, tangible object like a stone or a quartz or whatever.
Hmm.
And what it does is when activated, busted, broken, blah, 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 however you want to flavor it, the spell's effects instantaneously come up. It's just a thing that happens. And so it could be a random chart table. It could be a spell like fly. You may not want to give them a carpet of flying, but you do want to give them the option to use something super cool in that moment. So you give them a glyph of flying. It only works once, maximum of 5 minutes. It's done. But they get to be really cool for that 5 minutes.
So I got a question then. What is the difference between a glyph and like giving somebody a potion of flying or like a scroll of flying or some shit like that?
Every single bit of it is flavor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The difference is I can explain why a spell like Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion could be on a stone, but I can't explain how you can take that as a potion. So it's basically
that makes
this
sense. It,
stuff
it
as
gives you flavor options for
yeah,
things that otherwise wouldn't just be, I'm gonna fucking pound bag this alcoholic beverage and hope it has magic.
yeah. I know that you can go online and find go to donjon.com and
Then get
Donjon
lost in all of the fucking randomness that you
all
can
the
provide.
but Donjon does have a random glyphs table or a thing that tells you like, hey, this is blah blah blah. This is what you find. But those glyphs, they're really fun. They can be randomly generated. They won't break your game, and it'll give the player something super cool. You could have a 10th level spell or a 9th level spell stuffed into this little stone at like 3rd level, and it's really badass for 5 seconds,
All right,
and
that
then
seems
it's done.
cool. That seems
So
cool.
there's a stone that the player characters in my game have that does something incredible that they haven't figured it out yet. I don't even think they realize they have it yet. So, damn it! I just created spoilers.
Dude, congratulations!
Oh my God.
Now they're gonna look through every last bag that they have, looking for this thing. It's like, oh, this. Let's say it's a random coin. That's like, oh, this was kind of described a bit specially. I guess it does have magic.
Yeah. Anyway, it does something really really cool, but it only does it the one time, and that's one of those things that I really enjoy as loot for players. It's, you can give them power word kill as a spell right there to completely decimate one of the NPCs for an entire encounter.
I
Uh,
could see how that could also just be cool for little trinkets too, because you got like, let's say this cool chess piece or something that has this glyph on it, and then you cast the whatever happens to be on it, but at the end of that you still have the cool chess piece. It just doesn't have
oh yeah,
magic anymore. And you could add that to the home base thing.
yeah. It's really glyphs are really great. I enjoy them. Uh,
Well, you've won me over. I'll probably put more of those in.
yeah, yeah, totally look into them. They're really good. And as always, there are random tables for everything. Use them. Use them all obsessively if you must. So yeah, um, uh, yeah, glyphs are really really good.
Well, everyone, thanks for listening to our episode on balancing loot, and we'll see you next time on Playing God. You gonna say anything, Xander?
Oh shit! Later, man.